Travis Wingudsa. In the Book of Mormon, there are two languages spoken of, though it's understood that Babylonian is also in there, but Babylonian is not considered the Book of Mormon good guy language. The Semitic language is considered the bad guy language. Jewish language is not considered Babylonian. So thus Paleo-Hebrew is not Babylonian. But after the Jews got taken captive into Babylon, they changed the language into Semitic. And thus, to be abusive to Jews now, it's called being anti-Semitic. Which, technically, Jews are Hamido, from Egyptian, Ham. And so, in 1835, Joseph Smith acquires a Greek English lexicon, a Hebrew English lexicon, a Hebrew biblical text, a Greek biblical text, and some other grammars are mentioned in the church history. It was his intention to learn the original languages of the Bible. And they tried to hire a teacher for biblical Hebrew. He failed to show up. And so they then found Rabbi Sykes. He agreed to join and help out and teach biblical Hebrew. He's the learned Jew Joseph refers to in the King Follett Discourse. And in that discourse, there's several different accounts. If you go to the josephsmithpapers.org, though in 1971 the church uses the church history version, but they just take out the biblical Hebrew that was put into it, which was incorrectly duplicated in the original. So let's see if I can find where he talks about it. To be continued. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, no. Righteous everlasting burnings, which means sun, a sun, fire and brimstone. It's hell. Oh, here we go. I did have it in this portion, not in the to be continued portion. Alrighty. He talks about, and I'll just jump in, I suppose I am not allowed to go into an investigation of anything that is not contained in the Bible. If I do, I think there are so many overwise men here that would cry treason. I think they made some changes. I don't think he used overwise. He was a little more bold and put me to death. So I will go on to the old Bible and turn commentator today. I shall comment on the very first word in the Bible. I will make a comment on the very first sentence of the history of creation in the Bible. Bereshit. That's from the Hebrew. I want to analyze the word, Baith. That's the first letter, which is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And he calls it a word. You notice that? I don't think any BYU apologist has noticed that. Good for you, Joseph. You've just humiliated Mormon apologists who would arise in the future to destroy the church. In, by, through, and everything else. Rosh, the head, and then sheet. It's actually just supposed to be eat, because the Rosh contains the SH. And so that's an error in the transcriber. It's a grammatical termination. And he's talking about the traditional understanding here. He's not making the correction here. Here he's about to get into the correction, but he doesn't explain how it works. When the inspired man wrote it, he did not put the Baith there. An old Jew without any authority added the word. He thought it too bad to begin to talk about the head. It read first, the head one of the gods brought forth the gods. That is the true meaning of the words. Baro signifies to bring forth. If you do not believe it, you do not believe the learned man of God. Well, the current Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not believe the learned man of God, the founder of their organization. In their gospel topic essay, Translation and Historicity of the Book of Abraham, they denounce Joseph Smith as a translator. All translations, even the King Follett Discourse. This is why it has never been put in the Doctrine and Covenants. Instead, they don't refer to Joseph Smith as a translator, they call him a revelator. It's supposed to be prophet, seer, revelator, and translator for Joseph Smith. Hiram Smith was prophet, seer, revelator, and patriarch. Brigham Young was nothing. He was the president after he kicked out Thomas B. Marsh and exalted himself to become president with those that were supporters left in the group. And all he had was the key of the kingdom to preach. That's it. Not the key of the kingdom to preach. There's a big difference in keys, Oaks. And so I've told the story multiple times on how I wanted to find out how he translated this passage, because eat as a grammatical termination causes some problems. He's using brought forth in the past tense. The Jews, even in the Jewish Publication Society's English translation, says when God began to create. They're also using the verb incorrectly. In Hebrew, you have before a vowel a type of determinative that identifies whether it's past, present, or future tense. And now there is inconsistencies in the Bible, as there were two different Masoretic groups utilizing their different, or was it four? Each using their different manner of writing the biblical Hebrew text. And so you've got to pay attention as to which one is taking over the text. And so for past tense, it's the N in biblical Hebrew. In present tense, it's the yod. We put the yod in front of the verb. And for future, it's the T, the tau. And so nun, yod, tau, past, present, future. And so the T if he's going to separate the Beth and the Tau from the word and just have Rosh as the subject, which is proper and appropriate. Otherwise, the T at the end of Rosh would mean the female heads. And I'm sure all women would yeah, that's what it is, that's what it is. But only one problem: the verb does not correspond in number and gender to that number and gender for the subject. If you know anything about foreign languages, or ancient languages in this case, you need to have number and gender correspond with each other. And so the T would therefore have to go before the verb bara. And so it's will create. And that puts a whole new twist on the translation and sets the pattern for the rest of the text. Now, Rosh as just the head, or head, is more of an adjective than it is a proper noun. But the text, when translated through this process, reveals that the head god is Yah. That's the Hebrew God. And then if you're wondering, well, Jehovah, right? Yahweh, Jehovah. No, that's the Son. There's a passage that talks about dividing light between darkness. That has an alternative translation of Son of the light, Son of the darkness. Now, I didn't fully understand, other than Mormonism bias, Jesus and Lucifer, until I found out about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they talked about the sons of light. And that particular document talks about the sons of light and the sons of darkness battling it out. And that made it all clear to me. That's what it's referring to, is that you have the two main sons of the head, who is Yah, and it just so happens that the son of light is Yah also. So you have Father Yah and Son Yah, just like in Egyptian you have Father Amen and Son Amen, of whom Joseph Smith refers to as the main name of Jesus Christ for Mormons. Even Son Amen, even Jesus Christ, even Alphas and Omegas, in the Doctrine and Covenants. And so, having deciphered Paleo-Hebrew, having figured out how Joseph Smith translated the biblical text to correct it with its errors that were in it, the church attacked me. When I came to them, said, hey, Joseph Smith is a translator of biblical Hebrew. It's correct, he's true, church is true, isn't this great, awesome. No, they attacked me. They secretly created a troublemaker file for me. They tried to get my stake presidency and bishopric to combine together to have me excommunicated, find fault with me, to remove me from the church, and eliminate their problem. And the churches had so many problems because they don't have the key of translation. They first get attacked for translation by, I keep wanting to call it Solomon Spaulding, but there's like the Sidney Rigdon thing, Bishop. I'm going to have to look it up, see if we can solve this once and for all. Bishop Spaulding, Joseph Smith as translator. Spaulding, yes. F.S. Spaulding. F.S. Spaulding. F.S. Spaulding. F.S. Spaulding. It's just saying Bishop Spaulding. Amazon Archive, Book of Mormon Central.org. Yeah, it's a Spalding nonetheless. It's not Solomon Spalding though, unless it's F. Solomon Spalding, Dr. Dentist, Bishop of Utah. In 1900 came out with Joseph Smith as translator, and the church was unprepared. Here we have 1912 as a date. Okay, it was 1912. I stand corrected on the date. And so it was like in the 20s, like 24 or 26, when R.C. Webb, who purposely takes on lost causes just so that he can become popular with the publication of his books using the pseudonym R.C. Webb, published a response to Spalding. And that's where we get the rhombus concept and all sorts of other little fun things that don't show that Joseph is an actual translator. He used unsound reasoning to support Joseph. But nonetheless, the church was a little relieved as somebody else outside of Mormonism had to save the church from humiliation, embarrassment, and utter failure, as the church would have collapsed for not having the key of translation, but claiming to have the key of translation, as all Mormons know they're supposed to have. And then you have 1967, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York finds papyri, and somebody recognizes it as belonging to the church from their Book of Abraham. And deals and arrangements were made for the church to obtain possession of it. And so now they have it. And that was under David O. McKay. David O. McKay, again, had a perfect opportunity to demonstrate his ability to make a translation and show he has the key of translation and finish what Joseph Smith didn't finish, because he got them in 1835 as well, and may have spawned his desire to pursue studying ancient languages. But he didn't get to what he got to until 1838, and that was only a brief period of time, as he got arrested, and then the leadership crisis occurred that I call, in which Thomas B. Marsh left, and David Whitmer left, and all because of the Danite uprising that occurred in the church, the secret combination that rose up and exalted Brigham Young to the president of the key of the kingdom of preaching the gospel. And so it wasn't until 1839 that Joseph came back and called Brigham Young Judas for removing a good man and exalting himself. And so David O. McKay blew it, passed it off to Hugh Nibley. Hugh Nibley rambles and rambles and rambles, and using big words, never making sense, just rambling, talking about Captain Obvious stuff, and turns out that he didn't know either and was a little concerned. And so then you have, from this, John Welsh, and it's not John, it's nickname John, or the name he goes by, but he thinks, having served his mission at 19 years old, he found Hebrew chiasmus, and that therefore there's Hebrew chiasmus proving that the Book of Mormon is true. It's supposed to be Egyptian, John. Well done, you've confirmed plagiarism. But nonetheless, he gets hired by BYU to start up a Mormon apologetic group, which then eventually becomes Farms under Daniel Peterson. And they acquire John Tvednes, John Gee. Wilford Griggs didn't really be a part of it. My dad knew Wilford Griggs from Berkeley, and so when Wilford Griggs gave a lecture at BYU, my dad took me to see him so that Wilford could dismiss my claims that Joseph Smith is a translator, as Wilford told my dad and I that he once was looking over a casket, and everybody around him was saying, "Well, what is that symbol?" And Wilford said he had no idea. But instead of telling them, "I don't know," he said, "It looks like a cat," and went on a whole ramble spiel to defend the position that it was a cat. And it could have been a cat, but he didn't know. He just threw it out there. And so everybody, as a result, trusted him to be a professional, and they all ran with the understanding that it was a cat. And I'm standing there as we're walking, just horrified that he couldn't just tell them, "I don't know. We'll have to do some investigation and do some research to find out if it's Bast, the cat god variation." It is Bast, right? Egyptian god. Cats, yeah. Bast. Bastet is the female, and Bast. Well, no. Bastet. Bast. They both have the feminine plural, or feminine singular ending for Egyptian. But, yeah. Cat goddess. And so he wasn't any help at all. My dad also tried to humiliate me as not having any smarts with Egyptian when he had found a computer program online back in the 2000s, early 2000s, as I was working on deciphering Egyptian petroglyphs at that time. And he had taken the test and did horrible. And so he thought, yeah, I can get Travis now. I'll show him he's not a translator. And so he sat me down. Okay, whatever. Aced it. My dad was shocked. One of those moments in life when you're proud to be a son. And so, yeah, that's what I've had to experience, is Mormons keep coming at me to destroy me and prove me wrong that Joseph Smith was not a translator. Why are Mormons so afraid of Joseph Smith being a translator? It just boggles the mind. And so after that, with the Farms organization, you also have the emergence of well, let's see, Mark Hoffman was first. He was the 80s. He comes out with plagiarized documents saying that the church wasn't the true successor, that it was supposed to be Joseph Smith III with the the Salamander letter. And there's the news report of Mark Hoffman and Spencer W. Kimball and Ballard and Packer and Hinckley. They're all looking over at the table where he's got the documents, and they're, oh wow, and Hoffman receives compensation for giving them to the church, including the Deseret coin, and then it turns out that somebody was about to expose him, and so then he decided to go into bomb making, and one of the bombs went off with the bishop's wife, who was trying to get the mail, and The other one was in his car. It went off, and now he's in prison. And as far as I know, he's still alive. But again, the church had to do PC damage, public relations, PR damage. And so, yeah, he's still alive, 65 years old, life imprisonment, Utah State University. Oh, well, no wonder. He pleaded guilty. Murder, theft by deception, fraud. And so, yeah, in 1987 was when that he pleaded guilty. But, yeah. Oh, there's the picture of all of them hanging around. I've already got the picture, but why not put it up here for you rather than trying to search for it. Save image as, and put it in the file. Voila. I should already have the New York Times thing, because the New York Times came out in '67 when the trade was made back to the Church of the Papyri. As Egyptologists were able to look at it and say, we can't find the Hebrew name Abraham anywhere on the Egyptian text of the papyri. No duh. But the church, not having the key of translation, were like, oh no, Abraham, the Hebrew word, is not in the Egyptian text document. What do we do? They're going to destroy us. And thus they concocted the whole revelation, not translation. Because if you get exposed, yeah, cover it up and lie. And so then we get to September 6th. Do you remember? I think it was 1993, if I remember correctly, for the September 6th. Again, we can look it up so I can confirm it for you. September 6th. Looks like we got to add Mormon. September 6th, Wikipedia, were 6 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who were excommunicated or disfellowshipped for finding out the truth about the church history. It was coined by the Salt Lake Tribune. Yeah, allegedly publishing scholarly work against or criticizing church doctrine or leadership. No, they found lots of historical evidences, like the rocks in the hat, the arrest in 1826 for being a glass looker, and they weren't being mean to the church. They worked for the church at BYU, and so here's the name of the 6 individuals, it looks like. Lynn Canavo Whitesides, Avraham Gileadi, Paul Toscano, that's familiar, Strangers in Paradox, rather than Paradise, Maxine Hanks, Lavina Fielding Anderson, and the famous, or infamous, depending on whether you're Mormon or ex-Mormon, D. Michael Quinn. I took his Sociology of Mormonism at the University of Utah. He would not talk about September 6th. I don't know why. That was the first time I ever heard of it. That was in the mid-2000s, when I went to his class. And so, yeah, decades later. A decade later, I guess. And so yeah, he's gone on to publish the Mormon Hierarchy series. Not too long ago, it was either last year or the year before, he came out with his most recent book in the series. But yeah, again, rocks in a hat. Oh no, what do? We're supposed to be the translators, and now Joseph is being exposed again of Mormonism and the magic world view. Oh no, what do? And so again, they concocted Joseph was not a translator, he was a revelator, as their excuse for why they don't have the key of translation. And so then I come into the picture as I decipher Paleo-Hebrew in February 1997, and then go on to recognize that the Egyptian petroglyphs have not been translated by Egyptologists. The characters in the petroglyphs are not even being utilized in the Egyptian sign list by either Budge or Gardner or anybody. And as a result, I walked right into it, and the manner in which I deciphered it was knowing through Eva Vasilevska's anthropology of the Middle Eastern cultures, ancient Middle Eastern cultures. I did a report on how both the creation story in the Bible and the flood story in the Bible were both creation stories of the Egyptians, of the Heliopolis first and then the Ogdod second, and demonstrated both linguistically and storyline of how they were one and the same. And that then helped me understand, as I was already into understanding that back in 1999, when Gary Greenberg came out with 101 Myths of the Bible, which helped me figure out the names in the translation of the Genesis text according to the pattern of Joseph Smith and the King Follett Discourse. As I kept on going, that was my main goal. What is the rest of the translation then? And so there were words that were coming up as names that I couldn't identify, and sure enough, they were Egyptian names, and problem solved, and wouldn't you know it. And so 101 Myths helped me on the path to figuring out how to decipher Egyptian petroglyphs. As also during that time, Dorothy Murdoch was also working on her hold on, we'll again look it up. D.M. Murdoch. She goes by the pseudonym Akarya S. I'm not sure. Christ in Egypt. That's the main one. And she does one on Did Moses Exist? And she says no. But she died in 2015. And Gary Greenberg is either too old or he's finally passed on. He's not well known anymore. He was very popular with 101 Myths, but you can't find him on Wikipedia, I don't believe. But she's focused on the New Testament, showing how Jesus came from the Egyptian documents, where Gary Greenberg was noticing a few things and threw them in a book. Didn't reference them. Gary Greenberg. Okay, they do have his, because there's also a psychologist, and he's not the psychologist, he's the president of the Biblical Archaeology Society. And yeah, they have American author and comedian. No, not comedy, not that guy. No. Why do you have sand up there? No, it's not sand. Author 101 Myths of the Bible. Gary Greenberg. Click on Gary Greenberg. Yeah, he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, despite his increased popularity in 1999 for 101 Myths of the Bible. He also has the Judas Brief, Genesis Chronology, which was recent. Oh, the case for proto-gospel. This is 2020, so he's still putting out books after all this time. He did the Moses Mystery, also called Bible Myth, in 1996, and then came out with 101 Myths of the Bible in 1999. And then the case, let's see, 2007 was the Judas Brief. And so, yeah, then after I tried to contact him, I got word of the 2019 publication of Genesis Chronology and the Egyptian King List, and obtained that. And it looks like this year he came out with a case for a proto-gospel recovering the common written source behind Mark and John. So I'm already familiar with the common, or the sources for those. So that's. But yeah, there's nothing on Wikipedia for him, despite his extreme rise to popularity with 101 Myths. Yeah, it was his book that helped me figure out the names and that were Egyptian in the biblical Hebrew text, and I then took on the role of actually developing his compilation into an actual theory to be tested, and that's how I deciphered Egyptian petroglyphs and made the connection that all the stories in the Bible come from the Egyptian petroglyphs and the various translations of each. The Genesis chapter 1, for example, comes from the Heliopolis creation glyph of Nut, Shu, their father, separating her from Geb, her brother, as she is impregnated. And so there's different translations that come from that. There's the God story of Nut and Geb falling in love with each other. They have sex, she gets pregnant. Adam tells Shu, separate them, got to keep them separated, and so thus he separates them, and she's already pregnant, but now she can't because her father had separated her from Geb, and so Thoth comes into the picture and says, oh, I'll create 5 extra days in the calendar, so it's no longer a religious calendar, you now have a civil calendar, and those 5 extra days were allowed to give birth to those 5 extra children, and of whom Osiris and Set come, and thus you have that story that emerges from that as Cain and Abel in the Bible. And so in Genesis 2:4, where it says, thus were the heavens and the, or now these are the generations of the heavens and the earth in the day that they were created. It's because the Bible author was using different translations, because generations is only for human offspring, not heaven and earth having children. But that's where it came from, and that was the key to making the connection. And other scholars had known about this and were suspicious, but they didn't know how to develop it into a theory, as Gary Greenberg didn't know how to do, and D.M. Murdoch didn't know how to do either. She just said, the Bible is just a joke, it's just taken from the Egyptian stuff, and they had no clue and turned it into their own separate religion. No, Dorothy, keep going, use science, and unfortunately she's dead too early. Died of cancer. But I've gone on, developed the theory, and so in Mormonism, again, when in 1981, the church came out with the triple combination, and in the triple combination, it was footnoted and referenced to the Bible as well as to the Topical Guide and Bible Dictionary. And Nelson is the only apostle I can find of the prophets and apostles and the presidents of the church who went out to claim that the Book of Mormon footnoting in 1981 was now the fulfillment of Ezekiel 37. The stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph of Ephraim being united in one. No, Nelson, Elder Nelson, no. You have not read your Book of Mormon. Who is Lehi a descendant of the two children of Joseph? Is it Ephraim or Manasseh? Check again, Nelson. The Book of Mormon is by Manassites. Manassehim, and not Ephraimites. And he makes a big error in that. However, he also errs because he did not catch on that the Book of Mormon also talks about a brass plates, which are written in Egyptian, which contain the record of the Jews and the record of Joseph. And that's why Laban had the plates, is because he was a descendant of Joseph, like Lehi was, but through Manasseh instead of Ephraim. Thus Laban had the plates because he was through Ephraim. And the brass plates, as Nephi says, he prophesies, these plates shall go through all the world and they'll never be tarnished. Well, where are they? Why aren't they through all the world? It's been a long time. We're running out of time. They're supposed to go throughout all the world. Where are they? That's because Ezekiel 37 is the prophecy in the latter days, as it mentions King David in that chapter, the future king to restore the kingdom of David. It's during his time, and it's going to be him, a man like Moses, who the Jews understand, not Christians, is to unite these two books into one. The Book of Mormon isn't fully plagiarized from the Book of Mormon or the Bible. Only Isaiah and some Sermon on the Mount and a few others, but no, it's not the Bible. It's a complete separate book with separate stories. What Ezekiel 37 is talking about is that both the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah are talking about the same stuff. It's just that Joseph has more stuff to put in that the Jewish version took out. And so the brass plates is thus larger than our Tanakh, the Old Testament. And the church, again, if they don't want to accept that Joseph is a translator and just call him a revelator, then yes, they're going to not admit that the Book of Mormon is not the fulfillment of Ezekiel 37. They're going to say, oh yeah, it is, because Joseph Smith was just a revelator and blah blah blah, and we don't want to have anything to do with any future book coming from the Egyptian records. So that's why Joseph Smith called the papyra Thing 1 and Thing 2, Thing 1 being a book of Abraham, Thing 2 being the book of Joseph. And so when you look at what he's doing, he's filling in missing information from the Book of Judah text and taken it from the Egyptian documents, the picture glyphs, not the text. And that's how Joseph made his translation, and that's what I had deciphered, picture glyphs, and made the connection with the Bible all coming from the picture glyphs. And so, yes, I am a translator, having deciphered Paleo-Hebrew, having deciphered Egyptian petroglyphs, having made the discovery that the petroglyphs in their various translation levels correspond with the different stories in the Bible, and thus I can fill in the gaps. Not just do the books that I've published showing the direct comparison with what we currently have, but the missing information. And so yes, I've made a translation of Facsimile 3. I've finished the work that David O. McKay couldn't do, passed it on to Hugh Nibley, couldn't do, Egyptologists couldn't do, because they only know how to translate text, not petroglyphs. And that's what Joseph Smith did, was translate the petroglyphs. He even says it in his first chapter. I refer you to the picture at the beginning of the text. And everybody misses that. They don't understand. Because they don't understand that the pictures are supposed to be translated. That's what Joseph was doing. He didn't finish. He wasn't doing a translation of the text. And so Facsimile 1 is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is a plagiarism of the Bible, so that he fills in the gap with chapter 1. Chapter 3, 4, and 5, which 4 and 5 are just the rewriting of the creation story in chapter 1 of Genesis, has to do with facsimile number 2, the hypocephalus under the head. And that's not even fully translated, because there's more to that than what Joseph put in. And you can see it in his explanations, and also represents. That's Joseph saying, hey, this has multiple representations for each of the characters. And when I deciphered Egyptian petroglyphs, I went, oh yeah, that's Joseph. There it is. Wow, what do you know? He's a translator. And so these things did not have to be scary for the church. They could have trusted that Joseph Smith was a translator, but that would mean that they don't have the key of translation. And so when I come along and tell the church, hey, Joseph Smith is a translator, isn't that awesome? I was their enemy automatically. I didn't realize it. I didn't know it. I thought I was being faithful to the church, as I was faithful to Joseph Smith in establishing that he was a translator. And it's because they now see me as a threat to their authority, as being frauds, not having the key of translation. And Louis Zucker also is another person who gave a lecture at BYU. He was a professor at the University of Utah. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he gave a lecture saying Joseph Smith is not a translator. And so again, the church, oh no, please, Revelator, no, just Revelator, leave us alone. Mormons had the opportunity to learn from Joseph Smith how to be translators so that they can defend themselves from future attacks, and could have led the way in Egyptian decipherment and Paleo-Hebrew decipherment. But instead, the church decided to cover things up and protect themselves from the attacks of the world. And as a result, I rose up in the church and have put them to shame because they didn't do what they claimed they were supposed to be able to do. And still to this dying breath, We are the translators, Travis, not you. We, and I mean by we, the Lord will tell us when we will translate. It's His will of when it's supposed to be done. Well, it's His will now because you weren't listening, so He went to somebody else who was listening. So, this was an extra long video that I wasn't expecting to do, but is necessary because I will be doing the brass plates translation for you. Because remember, in the Book of Mormon, which was plagiarized, but as I've been telling you, is encoded, a future person by 23rd of September 2017, which is right there in chapter 1, is supposed to be a decipherer of Paleo-Hebrew and Egyptian, and will be able to translate from the Egyptian records the brass plates, filling in the missing portions as Joseph tried to do, but was murdered before he could finish it all. And so guess what? If Mormons can't do it, and Mormons forbid other Mormons from doing it, and Egyptologists are in denial because all they know is translating text, I'm the only one on earth now. Now that Gary Greenberg, even though he's sort of backing off from 101 Myths, as you can tell, which is kind of unfortunate. Gary, you had it. It was right there. So I took it and ran with it. But Dorothy also, I mean, she was slamming him. She's the zeitgeist girl. But she made some errors because she wasn't developing it into a theory as you're supposed to as a scientist. You're supposed to develop theories to test whether your hypotheses are correct. But that was up to me. And I've gone over the story of how I was helped along the way for this end, for this purpose. And yes, I published some books. I've got Genesis to Noah published, and I've published the facsimiles assisting with the Abraham story, and yeah, it's easy to do once you know how to do it. And Joseph Smith is a translator. And I say this I don't need to. Don't need to. It was through revelation, obviously, as Mormons call it. I followed the faith process, leading to the manifestation of it, the physical manifestation of it. And Mormons don't even know how to do that.